Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Retail Tales. My name is Saurabh, and I'm the host of this podcast. If you're a regular listener, you already know what this podcast is all about. But if for any reason, if this is the first time you're tuning in, or if you need a quick reminder, this podcast is exclusively focused on discussing all things AI across the retail value chain. All right, let's begin today's episode. I've had several leaders join me as guests on this podcast so far, all of them, stalwarts in their respective fields. And that's no different for my guest today as well. What's different with him, though, is that here's a guy who can probably predict a disruption in your supply chain before your morning coffee gets cold. He's one of the leading voices in supply chain, not just at Deloitte, but also in the industry. He's all about that AI first mindset, tackling, the complex supply chain challenges with a tech savvy twist. At Deloitte, he's been instrumental in integrating AI to enhance supply chain resilience and efficiency for our clients. Beyond boardroom, he's known for his collaborative spirit and knack for leading large scale initiatives that actually work in the real world. He's not just about ideas. He's about making them happen. He and I are also partners in crime for one of our most beloved global brands in the market. So I have seen him in action from very close quarters. Honestly speaking, if supply chains had a superhero, he'd be wearing a cape. So please join me as I welcome Kevin Mahoney to the podcast. Kevin, welcome to the Retail Tales. It's a pleasure having you on the show today.
Saurabh, it is wonderful to be here. I wish every time I started a conversation, I got that type of introduction. So really excited and similar. Love working with you and solving some of the most complex issues that we're seeing across the supply chain, and especially enabling them with not only technology, but AI solutions to really differentiate from others. So excited for this podcast, excited for the conversation, and always great to collaborate with you.
Love it. For the listeners, Kevin is a partner at Deloitte, and his expertise spans across integrated business planning, omnichannel network strategies, and end-to-end process optimization. He is a resident expert, in transforming supply chains through cutting-edge technology and strategic insights. So, Kevin, let me ask you this: where's your cape?
Right now, just a hood. My wife doesn't like me wearing a cape around the house, so
Wear it somewhere. All right. Jokes apart, I know for a fact. I know about your journey. But why don't we start with you telling the listeners in your own words about your, current role at Deloitte, your professional journey so far, and some of the most critical milestones along the way.
yeah, absolutely. I think you know started my journey like many in this space in industry. And as a supply chain professional, getting hands-on experience really running operations at a major 3PL in the parcel space, helping to understand that at an early stage, how do supply chains work? What are the connectivity? How do we get down from, you know, a global shipment all the way to a delivery at an individual's home? And so my journey started learning the operations at that level, working in warehouses, working with drivers, working, to solve some complex problems on the ground floor. Moved my way into the corporate environment where I got a different lens, where I was able to relate not just the data and insights we were seeing at the corporate level, but what was truly happening on the shop floor. And so the solutions became quite real. With that experience kind of parlayed into the retail and omnichannel space in a big way, how as in the early 2000s, omnichannel and direct to consumer was really starting to take off, and worked for a retailer, Macy's, Macy's.com, Bloomingdale's.com, WeddingChannel.com, to develop a lot of the early solutions on how they delivered products to a customer or consumer's house, how they enabled all nodes in their network to be a part of that solution, and really coming up with some unique and distinct ways to serve customers and consumers. Um, from there, I affectionately say I came to the dark side and have been helping clients develop a lot of those solutions more broadly, both across industries, across the US and globally. And so really taking shape on, in the retail space, how do we look at the end-to-end supply chain? And how do we serve that customer consumer? And what's very interesting in that space, especially, is we talk a lot about the supply chain. The key component of the supply chain is understanding the customer, the consumer, and then working our way back. And so my journey has been, like I said, from operations, insight-driven solutions, to advising a lot of major and key clients on how to serve the one thing that they have in common, which is that customer consumer. So exciting journey. And I like to say every day in supply chain is a puzzle. And if you like puzzles, it's a great place to be because everyone has a different solution.
Love puzzles to the core. And you spoke about the dark side. I know from industry you did go to the dark side, but you're on the bright side again.
Yeah.
I'm not going to get into details of it, but people will eventually realize looking at your LinkedIn profile. But Kevin, over the last decade or so, retail supply chains have, kind of gone from being just in time to, how do I say that? Maybe just hold on, that phenomena with shifting consumer habits, globalization, and the rise of e-commerce. I know, and as I know you do too, supply chains have become more dynamic, more unpredictable also. And AI is now stepping in as a school-headed partner in this chaos. So I want to know from your vantage point, how have retail supply chains evolved and where does AI fit into this new era of complexity and speed?
Yeah, it's a great question. And if you think initially retail supply chains were simple, they were linear and products moved from manufacturer to wholesaler to retailer and then to the customer. A lot of the processes were fairly manual, and the key was ensuring products were available. So, inventory management, order processing, logistics, it was a simple process handled through fairly, linear and basic functions. Then we start to enable that information and take what was purely operational, layer on technology. And so we gain that, what was historically a manual process, enable it with data and technology to help drive efficiencies in the supply chain. And still at that point, fairly linear until we started to unlock what is the e-commerce and omni-channel space, which created a lot more complexity and just exploded the sheer number of nodes that we were
Yeah.
network, right? I was going full truckload to the back of a set number of stores in my network now to delivering to every single individual's home. And so the evolution of supply chain is continuing to build on that with data, analytics, insights, and automation. And the thing that really puts it in perspective for me when I think of evolution of supply chain, you would go to a store and you'd buy what you need and you'd bring it home. And all as a retailer I had to do was get it to that store and I controlled that whole environment.
Mm.
Now, if you take the perspective of every single person in your neighborhood goes online and orders their groceries, what you eat versus your next door neighbor versus the people across that is so different. And the sheer number of SKUs that are in that grocery shopping cart, and I have to figure out the solution to deliver all of that. And that's the environment we've unlocked in the supply chain, being able to give everyone everything and anything that they want at the touch of a button, at the speed that, we used to be able to deliver from, the manufacturer or wholesaler all the way through to a retail store. Now we're delivering to that consumer in a sheer number of, days or hours. So the complexities ramped up, the data and information has ramped up, the personalization and that people are letting you into their home, into their life, and you know them at a completely different level than you used to, has changed how we serve that customer. And AI is truly enabling that, not just from helping us to drive insights in our execution, but also predictive insights into what is likely to happen with that customer or consumer. What are they going to buy? When are they going to buy? Where are they going to ship? And what's truly going to help us create a competitive advantage in driving efficiency against all of that. And so this is a lot of fun right now. Uh,
I Yeah, I mean, sure it is because I mean the sheer number of the increase in the channels, and you keep hearing different retailers continue to try out different strategies to kind of acquire and retain customers. Obviously puts enormous amount of pressure on supply chains as well on a daily basis. So the complexity bit that you were talking about, it's kind of an understatement even to call it really complex. Look, you know it as well as I do. AI doesn't always need to come in with this grand entrance. Sometimes it's small wins that get the momentum going within an organization, whether it's smarter, demand forecasting or better inventory placement. Um, there are plenty of these AI appetizers before the main course. Can you share some examples where AI delivered quick and tangible wins in retail supply chains? Those little victories, that made people go, "Okay, this actually works."
yeah. So when you think of the role of AI in supply chain, well, even before that, the role of AI just in a supply chain professional's day to day, the companies that are starting to see the biggest advantage are people that are just driving some level of adoption. And that could be as simple as, you know, meeting notes in Copilot. If I'm a supply chain professional having a strategic conversation around driving a solution, and I'm sitting here taking notes every few sentences, am I truly engaged mentally to drive the solution that we need to drive
Mm,
to meet that customer consumer's needs or differentiate the solution for the business? So I guess before we even get into how do you apply it to a function, embedding it in some of the day-to-day tasks that make you a better employee, a more efficient employee, or, you know, incorporating it into um, things that are going to drive a better outcome for the business is key. And if your company and your employees are not even just starting with finding a way to leverage AI in their day to day, start there because that helps to drive more strategic discussions and decision making instead of taking notes and action items.
mm,
When we get specific into the supply chain, we've found that areas where the sheer amount of data has outgrown your traditional uh, methods, which in many cases have been Excel, to drive insights. And so when it comes to understanding the customer or consumer in the forecasting space, leveraging AI algorithms to understand your historical sales data, to understand what we may be seeing as micro or macro trends in a marketplace,
mm,
external factors and how they impact your demand patterns. I think we see AI leveraged in small pockets, whether it be demand forecasting, inventory management, optimizing components of the supply chain to reduce cost or delivery times. You see it in individual use cases where we're seeing AI and the role of AI expand in supply chains are companies and customers that are creating connectivity.
mm,
The supply chain is one of, if not the most connected function in an organization that deals with the most constraints. And when we look at a connected ecosystem and we're able to proactively identify issues so that we can react and solution them and solve the more holistic problem, that's where AI is really becoming more advanced. As an example, as changes happen in the global trade space, what are the impacts of in my supply chain? Is it upfront in the manufacturing, sourcing, raw materials? Is it through my lead times across the end-to-end supply chain from imports, exports, customs clearance, and then what other challenges may I have from a downstream costing implication? And so when we start to look at the role of AI, we can find quick wins in simple areas where the data has grown exponentially. We need to drive insights, and then we can find longer term differentiators when we start to connect that information and look holistically on the end-to-end value chain. But um, retail supply chains have a ton of data, a ton of variability, and where we find organizations that are using that information to drive insights, to be proactive or predictive in how to handle those, and decrease issues in the supply chain, those are the ones that are really starting to differentiate themselves.
yeah. And you were talking about the data points, the velocity of these data points also, when they occur, how they occur, to be reaching in a way that can be leveraged by the decision makers to make those decisions. How fast do they get there? Also, is kind of have been challenging over the last several years. So AI is proving out to be game changer there as well, just to get them real time insights into what they should be looking into, rather than what somebody's asking them to look into from a manual analysis perspective.
Absolutely.
Um, Kevin, every AI transformation leader, at least in my experience, has that one story, a project or an initiative that hit all the right notes. But that success usually has less to do with the tech and more with, the people, the process, the timing, and maybe a little bit of luck as well. I want to know what's been your most successful AI driven supply chain project in retail, and what were those ingredients that made it work so well for you and the organization?
Yeah. One of the largest retailers in the world, we were a key support and driver in implementing an AI-driven supply chain optimization project to improve both inventory management, demand forecasting, and supply chain efficiency, with kind of the overall objective to reduce costs, enhance customer satisfaction, and create consistency and streamline some of the operations. The team looked at enabling AI-driven demand forecasting and utilizing machine learning and algorithms to analyze some of that historical data.
Hmm.
They translated that information to drive automated replenishment solutions, right? Replenishment systems that ensured the products were being reordered on time based on just-in-time inventory levels and the predicted demand that we were hoping to see. And take what used to be manual processes, manual meetings to make decisions, and automate steps in the solution.
Mm.
Now, just to, everyone says, how is it successful? Is it successful overnight? No. You may start with automating 50, 60% of this, and then you continue to gradually increase that number, right? If I'm going to a meeting, we're making the same decision 99 out of 100 times. How much value are we getting out of that meeting?
Yeah.
So again, we're using AI-driven forecasting. We're automating components of the process, and in this case, replenishment. We're then leveraging that information to be smarter about other components around forecasting and replenishment. So dynamic pricing and adjusting some of those prices in real time based on, demand, competition, or other factors, taking it a step further and understanding, how do I optimize some of the routing and execution to bring those products? Again, I'm going to see variabilities in demand, but I still have multiple destination points to deliver product to. So how am I optimizing the routing? And then, when we're looking at this whole demand pattern, how do I then incorporate it even further upstream to understand where I have supplier risk? And so all of that came together to be a really powerful solution for a major retailer to not only ensure products were available, take non-value added activities out of the process,
Mm.
but also then incorporate that information back into solutions that allow them to be even more competitive in how they serve the customer from a pricing standpoint, more available on the shelf from optimizing how I'm getting the product, and then understanding if I'm going to have risk in certain dimensions, what alternatives do I have, whether that is product alternatives or other solutions or other suppliers to help meet that need. Um, you know, the, it sounds easy, it sounds logical,
Mm.
but there's key components that make all of this come together. First, from a functional lens, understanding how supply chains work, understanding how that then interacts with the technology, and most importantly, the data availability and quality, the infrastructure needed to create that connectivity, and then bringing our business partners along, right? Knowing we're going to be taking quote unquote control away from certain people and allowing those solutions to be automated. So getting that upfront cross-functional collaboration to derive the solution, and knowing that, like I said, you may only get 50% of that automation done in the first go, but the continuous improvement to, build on 50 to 60 to 70%, where the discussions we're having are discussions that impact top or bottom line components to the business.
Yeah.
They're not discussions to say whose data is right, whose data is wrong.
Yeah.
My customer is better, your customer is worse. Like it is literally what is the best way to serve our customers, consumers, and to strengthen the top and bottom line for the business. And so that is a really different discussion than whose data is right and whose data is wrong.
Yeah. I mean, some of the times leaders, even very experienced leaders in the industry, look at AI or consider AI as this magic wand, which will come in and fix everything overnight, or not even overnight. Like you do a 3-month project, build an AI algorithm, and your problems will be fixed. To your point, that's not how it really works. You have to stay consistent at the solution that you're building. The more legit data will go in, the more legit outcomes and recommendations will come out, but it's not going to happen overnight or within just one project. So that's one of the things that I keep telling my clients as well, whether it is supply chain or even other areas when it comes to AI. But very well put, Kevin. Thank you for that. My next question was going to be around the challenges. That supply chain leaders face, their biggest roadblocks. But I think you almost covered with the ingredients that you listed down in terms of technology, in terms of adoption, and in terms of the overall data readiness for an organization. Is there any other roadblock that you see though when supply chain leaders are looking to kind of make progress with AI?
Yeah, I think, I hit on some of them up front when it's data readiness. There's some, issues that I think just maybe roadblockers people think may exist that don't always exist, data
Mm,
privacy or security. 'Cause, I mean, some of this is very insulated. I think part of it is people are nervous to try.
mm,
And many of these AI use cases, you don't need to go hire a ton of people to do it or find an external third party. I mean, you can get started building this yourselves and testing some of this yourselves. Um, and so, the willingness to try, I think sometimes is a barrier for people getting started or try one or two use cases. Um, the other piece that, sometimes is a challenge is people believe change is kind of the best and worst thing in life, right?
mm-hmm,
Um, the word companies are exhausted by how much change we've undergone in the past, 5 or 10 years. I think AI, while some people see it as a major change, if you take the lens that it's not change, but it's actually growth,
mm,
that's a very different lens to this problem.
sure.
Change is exhausting.
Yeah.
Growth is exciting. And, when we have the right mindset that we're willing to try and we don't see it as we're changing everything, but we're finding ways to grow, I think you get a very different outcome and a very different level of engagement in the mentality around AI and around, trying to derive solutions that are differentiated. And so, yes, we can talk about your traditional. Yes, there's data quality concerns. There is legacy integrations. I don't have the right talent. Implementation costs are going to be through the roof. Like some of that's true. Some of that isn't. And some of that in the supply chain, especially some of these areas, when we really are willing to commit and test a small proof of concept, I bet you find a ton of value.
Mm,
And so some of those concerns start to alleviate themselves really quick. And maybe again, with the mindset of growth, we may not be 100% right day one, but we can continue to grow and get better at what we do. Um, you know, the thing with AI, even if you pull from Copilot, the meeting notes, are they 100% right? No. But if you have an acre of land, and I told you only have to mow half of it,
mm,
every week or 2 weeks, and half of it's always gonna be mowed, you'd be okay with that.
love it. Yeah.
And so, it's a starting point. It's not an end solution. It doesn't replace, you know, I haven't done a business case or done an implementation where we took AI and replaced everyone or
Mm,
replaced a ton of people, but we have found ways to leverage those people to build the business and make a strategic difference in the business from a top and bottom line perspective. And so people being afraid of, is AI going to replace my job? Is AI going to? No, AI is going to make your company a more competitive company, a company that customers and consumers look to because it differentiates and understands them and serves them in a way that they want to be served. And I think that's an exciting thing, both sides, as a company and as a consumer. When someone understands me and serves my needs in a way that other companies aren't, I think that's really exciting and actually a huge differentiator for any company.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed that one. One thing that I will take away from that answer, apart from all the other nuggets that you provided, is this whole notion of change being exhausting and growth being exciting. I love that. But for some of the supply chain leaders out there, especially in the retail area, if they haven't yet gotten started on their AI journey, and with the current hype cycle, call it hype cycle or call it the excitement around AI and generative AI, if somebody is still looking to start their AI journey, it can feel a bit like standing at the base camp of Mount Everest. It can be overwhelming. It can be there are lots of buzzwords flying around. Every journey, though, has to start with that single and preferably data backed step. But for leaders just dipping their toes into AI, where do you recommend they start? And maybe more importantly, what not to do?
Yeah. As a leader, in every sense of the word, you're setting an objective where you want people to follow you, and I think the key for success here is developing a clear vision and strategy for AI. Can you articulate the goals and objectives in implementing AI within your supply chain? Is it going to include improving efficiency? Is it going to be focused on reducing cost, enhancing customer experience, include all of this? And then understanding how are we creating a roadmap and prioritizing appropriately. Because once we get started, there's going to be a lot of people that want to enable something with AI.
Sure. Yeah.
But that prioritization, yes, it may change, but if we stay consistent with our vision and objectives, and then consistently review our prioritizations, because we know business priorities change, to understand where we want to invest, where we want to pilot or test, I think that's a critical starting point that we have. And there's a concept, the leader's intent. If you have a clear vision and strategy as a leader, that cascades under you, and the leader's intent is well known. It's you've heard the phrase, the tone at the top impacts the mood in the middle. When you set the tone at the top with a clear vision, the organization underneath you is going to be impacted and understand, hopefully, the excitement around AI. I think
You're basically dropping inside bombs on this podcast. I love it. Keep going.
appreciate that. So with that clear vision, obviously there's some tactical, right? Investing a little bit in data management, right? A lot of companies have spent quite a lot of time investing in improving data quality, improving data infrastructure. Do not let that be the thing that paralyzes you either. But know that is somewhat of a necessary evil in many cases for the output of the information. Start with a pilot area, a pilot project, something small scale, and measure success. And then as we continue to learn, incorporate those continuous learnings. What you're going to find is, the more you incorporate AI into your day-to-day, the better your team gets and the outputs get. But it's also going to impact, your team and the skill sets they need on a day-to-day basis. One of the things I love to do with my clients is pull the job description for an area of supply chain of what they're looking for today. Someone with PowerPoint skills, someone with Excel skills, and then pull one of the leading organizations and understand the skill set that they're looking for. SQL, Python, data science, it looks very different. Even if we're hiring at junior levels, planting those seeds of people that have that mindset or have some of that skill set, because you're comfortable with it, because you understand it, you're going to start to incorporate it, and that will spread. When you plant seeds, they grow. And so as you're building your team, it's not replacing who you have, but understanding what you're seeding and how they influence what you're intending to grow. And so again, I think developing that strategy, data management, starting with your pilots where you're measuring success, and then understanding the impact it's going to have on your existing team and how, your future team that you're continuing to build, how you want to start to impact what that does in your organization, so that it starts to breed a culture of innovation. I think that will help really any leader to get started and an organization to start to gain momentum and potentially adoption.
Mm. I mean, the
Hopefully adoption.
hopefully adoption, because ultimately the value, I mean, you can measure and estimate the value of any AI initiative all day long, but until and unless you drive towards adoption with the right change management framework and effort, it is not going to get you to the eventual outcome that you want to get to. Um, I know for a fact that supply chains are the most complex parts of any retail business, just because they are sitting right in the middle of your, every enabling function. And they are the backbone for a retailer to get the products in the hands of customers. So by virtue of that, supply chains often, if I can call it, gold mine of data and real world complexity. They sit on top of it, and yet sometimes supply chain or supply chain leaders are left out of big transformation conversations. They are pretty much driven by either tech or some of the customer facing businesses. But in your view, what role should supply chain leaders play in a retail organization's broader AI transformation? And are they the real hidden MVPs in this overall story?
So that's an interesting question, because obviously, as a leader in the supply chain space and someone who spends quite a bit of time focused on I also know most of the time the AI programs are not sponsored or driven by supply chain.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so what's most interesting about that is when it's being driven by other parts of the organization, inherently it starts to make its way to supply chain. And you implied this. One, we have a ton of data, which is good. But two, supply chain is a part of the organization where when things are going great, they look at the supply chain to create differentiation. When things are not going so great, they look at the supply chain to drive value. And AI is an interesting case because right now people are looking to prove the value of incorporating AI into a business. And so right now it's very interesting, Saurabh, because we're in this catch 22 where we may not be driving the AI agenda as a supply chain, but we very much are helping to make the case on why, on the incorporation of AI and its impact, because it very quickly impacts, bottom line and in many cases, top line. So as a leader in the supply chain space, when organizations are starting to talk about AI, they're going to be looking at AI first from a proof of concept. And the point of that proof of concept is not only show the impact of AI, but show benefits. And I think raising your hand within the supply chain space will both enable capabilities and value, which are two dimensions of, one, what we can provide as supply chain professional, but two dimensions that are helping AI, and driving adoption and taking those proof of concepts into more of a mainstream solution.
Mm.
The second is, as if your company's already done pilots and whether your supply chain was involved or not involved, when you go to a more broader mainstream string of pearls type of solution, they're likely solving a bigger business problem. And if you think in the retail space, what are biggest business problems right now? How do we create and bring products to market that our customers want? Well,
Mm.
we unlock responsiveness in our supply chain.
Mm.
How do we offset some of the challenges we're seeing in the global trade space due to tariffs? And well, let's look at our supply chain and understand the implications and tariffs and sourcing strategy. So as we think of the broader end-to-end issues that the industry is facing because of the connectivity of the supply chain, we likely can solve or are components of solving a large piece of that. And so as a supply chain leader, whether it's upfront raising your hand as that proof of concept, I think that's going to help not only identify value, but differentiate certain capabilities. And then we think of it more broadly as our companies have maybe done a proof of concept in, the marketing space or, procurement, I guess is part of supply chain, but certain components, of the business, whether it's marketing, human capital, et cetera. How do we then incorporate supply chain into those broader issues the business is facing? And we have a part in both of those. And so, again, we may not be the initial driver of incorporating AI into an enterprise, but as the enterprise is making that shift, we should be an enabler. Supply chain should be an enabler, be a differentiator, and be someone willing to raise their hand that's driving innovation. Pre-COVID, we didn't really have a seat at the table as much in many, many companies. We very much have a seat at the table right now. And I think more than anything, organizations more holistically are understanding the competitive advantage of the supply chain. And this is just another area I think we can continue to differentiate ourselves.
So essentially you're saying, yes, supply chain leaders are the hidden MVPs.
Yeah, I might be biased, but
that was amazing, Kevin. Thank you so much. Your insights are always great. And this conversation has been a case in point. Just by the virtue of collaborating with you and exchanging thoughts and ideas with you on almost a daily basis, I do have the luxury of learning from you and your expertise almost every day. But I'm glad that all of the podcast listeners were able to listen to your perspectives today as well, and hopefully learn a thing or two, at least a thing or two from our conversation. So again, thank you so much for being here, and thank you so much for sharing your thoughts.
So I really enjoyed this. If anything, I hope, the listeners understand that there's no use case too small to get started with AI. And in the supply chain, it could be as simple as receiving a product at your DC and challenges that you face or bottlenecks you face. We can think through how do we solution some of that or alternative solutions. It's an exciting time to be not only in supply chain, but from an AI perspective and what it can truly unlock and enable. And hopefully as companies continue to adopt, it becomes something that is really exciting and really differentiates for, you and I as consumers and the customers we're trying to serve. So thank you for having me. This was great.
Of course, exciting time it is. That was Kevin Mahoney from Deloitte. For the folks who are interested in learning more and or looking to get connected with Kevin, please reach out to him on LinkedIn. And with that, it's a wrap on this episode of the Retail Tales. Thanks for listening. Here's me, Saurabh, signing off. If you like the content, don't forget to follow this show and keep learning a thing or two about retail AI. You can follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe to the show on Spotify or Apple. Join me in the next episode of the Retail Tales, a show which is exclusively focused on exploring all things AI across the retail value chain. Until then, stay safe, stay healthy, and stay curious.